Thank you, Rishi. It is with such gratitude that I introduce our morning speaker this morning. Robert Kanjo Schwoch is a Zen Life instructor at ZLMC here, amongst many other things, and a longtime practitioner of Zen. He serves on the board right now as our vice president. He is the steward of our poetry circle, and he's been a member of our Zen Center since 2019. He recently retired from teaching creative writing, literature, and journalism at the University of Wisconsin, and now we get to fill his calendar, or at least try to. So it is with great joy that I introduce, please welcome Robert Schwoch.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Good to be here. Sorry, I couldn't be there in person. I really wanted to come down in person, but something is going on in Oak Park. I could not find a room anywhere near. So anyway, here I am in Milwaukee where I live, and it's good to see all of you, at least virtually. Some of you, if you've heard me talk before, have heard the story about how I first came to this Zen Center. I had just lost my husband of 32 years very suddenly and unexpectedly, and I was deep in grief. And I was in my local bookshop, and face out on the spirituality shelf, I saw this book, Appreciate Your Life. And I don't, Kelly, you might be pinned. I think they might be seeing you instead of me here. At least I'm seeing, there we go. Hi, everybody. So I saw this book, Appreciate Your Life, and it's by Taizan Maizumi Roshi, who happens to be the root teacher of this Zen Center and a lot of other Zen centers. Appreciate your life. And at that moment in my life, I thought, wow, if I can appreciate my life at this darkest, most horrible moment, I probably got it licked. I'll be able to appreciate it anytime. I'll have life kind of figured out. And I bought the book and I read the book, and I eventually found this Zen Center, and here I am. I've been hanging around virtually and in person ever since. Now, when I first landed here, all I wanted to be was okay. You know, that was like the most I could ask. And being okay in any situation, I think, is sort of the baseline of what Zen practice can offer. Most people, many people, when they embark on a spiritual path, are looking for light in darkness. They're looking for a way out of suffering into understanding and meaning. That's what I was looking for. Zen is really great at that. I'm not so sure Zen is great at marketing that. Because in Zen, the key to overcoming our suffering is to let go of a solid, independent, separate, ego-driven idea of self. And so therefore, we in the Zen biz are really careful about saying Zen is any sort of self-improvement program, right? We're careful about saying we're going to make anyone's self better. What happens is sometimes we're so careful, though, that it becomes difficult for us to say what Zen will do for us at all. So it's true, okay? We're not going to have our problems solved by Zen. We don't ever want to give anybody that impression. We're not going to escape the struggles of life through Zen. No matter how much we meditate, we're still going to experience trouble. We're going to have loss, illness, decline, death, all those things. And we're not going to like it. We're never going to like that. Zen isn't about putting a smiley sticker on the bad stuff. That's not what we're trying to do. As Zen practitioners, we are in the running for being okay in the face of the bad stuff. Okay, that we can put in the marketing brochure, right? Through meditative practice, through perceiving that our suffering is really not who we are or part of the core of us, we can be in the running for not losing our basic sanity when things go wrong. We can be in the running for experiencing bad breakups, terrible loss, grave illness, and still being able to do what needs to be done today, or we can still get in a hot shower and go, or we can still be able to laugh when the dog does something funny. We don't lose our basic selves over suffering. And for me, that's like the secret sauce of Zen. In my life, I faced my fair share of really tough times. And those tough times have driven me onto various spiritual paths in various religious traditions. And all those spiritual traditions did a decent job of helping me to understand mortality and making me comfortable with the idea of death. Zen, though, is the path that made me comfortable with the idea of life. And that's why I've never gotten off this path after first getting on it, thanks to some counseling I was in 30 years ago. Now, as someone who taught college for a long time, I can tell you nothing is better for learning something than having to teach it. I mean, I taught at a good college. And if you're going to teach something to hotshot 20-year-olds, you better know it. You better know it really well. And you're going to get questioned on it in such a way that you'll know it a lot better when you're done teaching it. I just finished teaching our core curriculum, all 3 courses in our core curriculum here at ZLMC. The opening course, Foundations of Mindfulness, the intermediate course, Path of Liberation, which kind of moves from attention to awareness in meditation. And then most recently, our Zen Life series that kind of crosses from mindfulness practice into the more spiritual world of Zen. That teaching experience, it deepened my own experience of Zen, and it gave me the idea for this talk. It occurred to me in this latest round of teaching that Zen maybe offers a little more than I've been giving it credit for, maybe a little more than just being okay in the face of difficulty. What Zen can offer more than being okay is what he promises in his book, Appreciation. We can be more than okay with the ups and downs of life. No matter what's going on in our lives, we can actually be grateful. We can maybe even be, and I don't know if I even dare say this in a Zen center, but we can maybe even be happy. You know, happiness is a very controversial concept in Zen. You know, I subscribe to the mailing list for the Buddhist publishing house Shambhala. I don't know if any of you subscribe to that mailing list, but I'm going to try sharing a screen. Here's their latest title. This is just coming out. Can you see it? Happiness is overrated. That is the name of their latest title. Just let's take a moment to just take in the majesty of that. Happiness is overrated. I mean, we wonder why Zen centers are small. You know, this is the reputation of happiness in Zen. It's maybe the most classic Zen title of all time. Of course, I've ordered it. I'm dying to read it, right? And here's the blurb. It's not out yet, but here's the blurb. Here's the promotional blurb. We spend so much time in pursuit of happiness, trying to purchase it, experience it, meditate our way toward it. But happiness is elusive and doesn't last. According to the teachings of the Buddha, Changlu writes, suffering is not a problem to be solved. It is a truth to be recognized. Happiness is overrated invites us to look deeply at the truths in our lives, not glossing over or denying our suffering, and to focus on the meaning and value already within us. That's the blurb for happiness is overrated. Now, okay, let's pick this apart for a moment, if we can. We want to be careful about pursuing happiness because happiness is elusive and doesn't last. Okay, agree. I agree with that. We spend a lot of time, we all spend too much time pursuing things we think will make us happy. And when we do that, we tend to lose the life that's going on right in front of us at the time. So that's bad. Plus, we don't know the future. We don't even know if that dream house or the dream job or the dream relationship is going to make us happy, that thing we're pursuing. Often what we think will make us happy falls short of that lofty expectation, and we wind up being dissatisfied instead. And then we've wasted all that energy chasing after something when we could have been devoting that to addressing our actual suffering and the suffering of those around us through meditative practice, through spiritual practice. So I get that. And under that, so it's not exactly happiness that's the problem, that's overrated. It's the pursuit of happiness that's the problem, okay? That's pretty bad news for the Declaration of Independence, I'll tell you. If pursuit of happiness is, I mean, life, liberty, and suffering, right? Hooray for America. Yeah, we have to be careful of chasing happiness as opposed to letting go of expectation and self-interest and living life as it is. That's what we practice in meditation. But what if we're not pursuing happiness? What if happiness just happens? What if it just shows up? Okay. Do we reject it then just because it's elusive? I mean, do we call it overrated when it just shows up on its own because it's not going to last? If we're on the beach and this amazing sunset over the ocean just lights up the sky, throws us to the core, do we shake our heads and go, well, I don't want to attach to that. You know, I don't want to get too involved with that. It's going to be over by 7:15. You know, we'll be back in darkness again. That's an attitude that I've seen in Zen over the years. And that, for me, is Zen run amok, right? Muting our happiness in the name of maintaining some flat emotional acting out of peace and serenity. That's the flip side of muting our sadness or our fear or our anger to maintain some outward appearance of peace, right? Or to convince ourselves that everything is okay. That's putting a smiley sticker on life. Okay. Everything in the world is definitely not okay. But we can be okay when things aren't. That's Zen. Now, part of this comes down to the often heard advice in Zen, and not to mention a million self-help books, right? That says live life at the moment. So, and of course, that's part of the essence of meditation, is to live life in the moment. We set time aside each day to practice living in just that moment, nothing else, so we can do that out in the rest of life. Okay, that's no denying that's part of meditation. But this morning, I'd like to try to go just a little deeper than that. Zen practice might mean being happy when happy comes and sad when sad comes, and being fully with it. But that's not all there is to life, living in the moment. In that moment to moment sort of life, yeah, we're not pursuing. Yeah, we're not grasping at things. We're living life as it is, and that's good. But being happy over happy things and sad over sad things is still a life led entirely in the relative world of things and happenings, of this and that, of here and there, of good and bad, of you and me. And I don't think that's exactly our path. It's not the path because it has no basis. It has no grounding. It has no whole to it. It has no absolute. And this is what I've realized in teaching lately, as I've been pressed to explain the ideas of absolute and relative to people who are new to Zen, okay, or relative newcomers. So allow me to attempt a recap of relative and absolute. If my students from Zen Life series are here, this might be a little familiar, sorry. But anyway, the way Zen looks at life, we exist simultaneously in two worlds or two realms, the absolute and the relative. And they're actually not different realms. The difference is in our perception. The difference is in our perspective at any one time. The relative world is made up of all we see, hear, touch, taste, smell, perceive, moment to moment. This is the world that most of us live in most of the time, the relative world, the regular world. Okay, non-spiritual people would say that's the whole world. Okay, in the relative world, Our perception of everything is in its relation to everything else. I am me, you are you, that tree out the window is that tree. And we perceive we are individual beings and things by our relation to one another, right? I know I am me because I am not you or that tree or anything or anyone else in the world. If any of us was the only person or thing in the universe, okay, would we understand who we were? Would we know who a person is? If red were the only color on earth, would we call it red? Would we know what red is? So nothing in the relative world exists by itself. It's all tentative. It's all dependent on the existence of everything and everything else, everything and everyone else. It's all constantly changing. It's all arising and passing away. So it's not actually a real world, even though we call it that and get bound up in that. It's actually a sort of a transitory, illusory, unreal world, and it doesn't warrant as much fretting and suffering as we put into it, okay? However, the relative world is not the whole story. Something does exist absolutely, not in relation to everything else. Why? Because here we are. I mean, all relative things depending on one another add up to an entire basic entity that exists, period. Okay. A philosopher might call that existence. An astronomer might call it the universe. A chemist might call it energy. A physicist might call it matter. A psychologist might call it mind. A pagan could call it nature, right? A Christian might call it God. Buddhists call it the absolute. We call it the absolute because it's not in relation to anything. It contains all things that are, ever were, or could be. So in this absolute realm, we are all one existence, one being, one sort of luminous, fully interconnected and interdependent web of perception and phenomena and consciousness, shimmering and constantly changing. So without that absolute, without that basis, the relative world would have no meaning, right? It would just be a bunch of things in relation to each other. But without the relative world, the absolute world wouldn't have any action. It wouldn't have any purpose. It would just be sitting there shimmering. So the two, the absolute world and the relative world, fit sort of seamlessly together. They're not exactly the same, but they're not different either. Now, that may sound esoteric, weird, especially if we're new to Zen, okay? And the term absolute has always been too neutral for my taste. I mean, it's for me, personally, especially coming out of a God tradition, coming out of a Christian tradition, absolute has always felt too disembodied, too impersonal for something that's supposed to contain all our consciousness and personality. I mean, for me, that term just falls short. So, but in the relative world, I'm a writer, okay? So I'll try to explain the absolute farther by using metaphor. Okay, so first I'll borrow a really famous metaphor for the relative world. To illustrate the relative world, the famed Vietnamese recently passed Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh uses the simple example of a stick, okay? Hold up a stick, one half is the left half, one half is the right half, okay? If we cut the left half off, do we end up with a stick that only has a right half? No. We end up with a stick with a new left half that's based on the new right half. Through that, we can see that left and right don't have any inherent meaning. They exist, we know what they are, but they don't have any inherent independent meaning except in relation to one another. They're empty concepts in and of themselves. And so Buddha taught that's the same with you and me and that tree. and everything else we perceive in the relative world in which the existence of everything and everyone is utterly dependent on the existence of everything and everyone else. That's not just philosophy, that's physics. That's what quantum physics is teaching us. Change one molecule in the universe, every other molecule is different, okay? So, another analogy, I sometimes have come to think of the relative world that we perceive with our senses as the clothing of the absolute, or like the body or the flesh and bones of the absolute. Our everyday relative world, it's the way the absolute looks, it's the way the absolute sounds, it's the way the absolute smells, feels, acts, and moves. But it isn't the absolute itself, right? Not any more than our clothes or our bodies are all of us, right? Now, the quality of our clothes, the quality of our bodies, it has some relationship to the quality of our living. It's not to say that it's not important. But if we get completely caught up in how our clothes and our bodies look and feel, we miss the absolute essence of living in them. Okay, so that's another analogy we might take. For another one, think of a board game. Think of Monopoly, okay? The Monopoly set, the game board and the game pieces, when we buy that, we say we bought Monopoly, but that's really not the game. The board and the set are not the game of Monopoly. We use the board and the pieces to play the game of Monopoly, okay? In that game, we all have these relatively different experiences of winning, losing, loss, joy, sadness, excitement, learning. And that all comes from the shared experience of playing the game, not from the board, not from the pieces. That experience of playing together that binds all the players together, that's the absolute game of Monopoly. Board's important, couldn't play it without the board, but the board's not the game. The board is the relative that we see and touch and perceive, and the game is the absolute. Our suffering in life, we might say, comes from attaching too much to the board of life and not enough to the game. And which ruins, when we attach too much to the board, it ruins the quality of the game. Last analogy, this may be my favorite. We might consider the absolute as music and the relative as all the different instruments, as the symphony. We might have the most expensive and beautiful guitar in the world, right? And we might take pride in that guitar. We might show off the guitar, post pictures of the guitar on Facebook, right? And we might grieve over its decline as it starts to wear out, right? But the guitar in and of itself is empty unless it's playing music. The music that comes out is the point, the meaning, the purpose of the guitar. The music is the guitar's guitarness. It's the absolute of the guitar. The music of the guitar makes is what has the power to bind us in shared experience, to uplift us, to ease our suffering. And without the music, the guitar is just sort of a meaningless piece of material. It's quizzical. It's empty. If there were no music, a guitar would be a complete question mark, right? Now, to make beautiful music with the guitar, we have to break our attachment to the instrument and focus on the playing, focus on the music. Just like a musician herself has to truly enter the zone of playing and forget about the instrument. All the instruction on how to play the instrument has to be internalized to the point where she can play and forget the particulars of how to do it, along with all idea of self or achievement or failure or accolades. That's all going to interfere with the music. It's just the music that's the point. In the last set of Zen classes, a student asked me, well, if the absolute is what's really meaningful, does the relative world even matter? Well, of course it does. If we're making music with the guitar matters, right? The guitar is essential. We want a good guitar. We want to learn the techniques of it well. We want to maintain it beautifully to make the best music we can. But the guitar itself is not the point. And if we attach too much to the guitar, it ruins the music. So transcending the relative world and connecting with the absolute, for me, is maybe the main purpose of Zen meditation. Okay, it's the purpose of life in the Buddhist faith. As opposed to mere mindfulness practice, which is great, it trains our minds to be open in the present moment, but it's not the spiritual path. In Zen practice, what we're doing is we're sitting in the relative world, but we're sitting without a relative self versus other mindset. We're not distinguishing, classifying, judging. We're taking the whole of the relative world in absolutely, non-judgmentally, complete openness. Okay, a Christian might call that contemplative prayer and might call it a way of spending time and connecting with God. We call it connecting with the absolute. So hopefully, as we practice meditation, we begin to assume this sort of absolute oriented, selfless mindset out in the relative world. And that helps us take correct action on behalf of all beings and things, and not only our small, temporary relative selves. What happens when we do that? Well, we're more than okay. We're more than steady. We're more than unshakable. When we do that, we've sort of licked it. I mean, we can appreciate anything that happens. We can not only just be with the ups and downs of life, but we can appreciate the whole up and down nature of life itself, right? We're joyful. We can be basically happy. So think about watching a really good movie. A movie with all happy parts would bore us to death, right? The lack of sad would make the happy meaningless. It's the interplay of ups and downs that makes a story great. What makes a movie is the fear or the danger or the horror mixed with the triumph or the love or the redemption. And we get completely absorbed in that. We're in absolute unity with the characters on the screen. We're not constantly talking to ourselves about our relationship to the movie or our place in the theater or our to-do list outside or our problems or our issues outside the theater. Unless the movie is bad, it's not holding our attention. But real life is a great movie because it contains all human emotion. In a good movie, we're not carried away by our fear or our anger or our disgust moment to moment. We feel it very intensely, but it doesn't reach us because it doesn't reach the core of us because we know in an absolute sense that the action on screen isn't real. It's empty. It's transitory. It ends and we leave the theater. That doesn't mean the movie doesn't matter. I mean, someone sacrificed a lot to bring us that great movie. And without the movie, we didn't have the experience, the satisfying experience of watching it, learning from it, growing from it, being better for it. So a person might say, but that's fine for a movie. What about real life? I mean, we can be totally involved in the movie because it's not real. But Buddha taught what we call real life is also empty, transitory. It ends and we leave the theater and we don't know what comes next. That's what meditative practice can help us realize. And that's how it helps us cut off the suffering mind and be with it all just in wonder. So enough with metaphor. Let me give one example I experienced recently in so-called real life that really drove this home to me. This happened while I was teaching this last class. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a big basketball fan. And I have season tickets for our professional basketball team here in Milwaukee, the Milwaukee Bucks. I go to most of their games. You might also know that I'm newly married to a Mexican man who's emigrated to the US. He's come to Milwaukee to be with me. And he's caught the basketball bug from me, big time. And lately, he's been going with me to every game, and he's been getting as excited and nervous and involved in the games as me, maybe more. Okay. Now, our team just suffered the worst loss in its entire history. We were the #1 team in the league, which meant in the playoffs, we got to play the worst team in the playoffs to start off, and the worst team beat us. That almost never happens. And before anybody in Chicago gets snide over this, the last time it happened 11 years ago, it happened to the Chicago Bulls. So, anyway, we were at the final game of this playoff series, my husband and me, and it's this game of wild ups and downs. It's close most of the way, then we get way ahead. It looks like we're going to win, and they make this amazing comeback. And then at the end, it looks like we're going to win again, and we make this horrible mistake and we lose. Our fans are beside themselves. I have never seen such an angry group of sports fans, or maybe people, in my life. I mean, they're shouting profanity, stomping the floor, pounding the walls. I saw one fan rip off his Bucks jersey and throw it in the garbage. And a woman behind us said she was going to give up the Bucks. I'm never going to another game again. We're leaving the arena, and I'm feeling bad for having dragged my husband into this and having gotten him involved in this whole thing, for hooking him on this stupid sport and putting him through this misery, this debacle. And I look over to say something, to maybe apologize, or, to try and make this up to him. And he is smiling. He's got a smile on his face a mile wide. And I'm like, what? He goes, wow, I wish we won, but wow, what a game. He said, basketball is so exciting. Right there, all my frustration and anger over what had just happened sort of melted away, except for being kind of pissed off that he was being more Zen than me after never having meditated a moment in his life, right? I said to him, do you still want the basketball tickets for next year then? He's like, of course I do. Are you kidding? Of course I want to keep going to the games. Now, there's a famed Japanese Zen teacher, Shunryu Suzuki, who coined a term for this kind of mind. He called it beginner's mind, okay? It's a meditative mind. It means dropping all self and concepts and preconceptions, and taking a fresh view of the world, free of our involvement in it, okay? We might call that an absolute view of the relative world. My husband's from a smaller Mexican city. It's a few hours drive from the beachy tourist areas of Mexico. His town doesn't have a basketball team, full of multimillionaires playing in a sparkling arena full of privileged fans. Okay, he's not used to that kind of spectacle. He was able to watch that game absolutely free from the relative story of self-interest and possible embarrassment surrounding us, for us fans who were experts, not beginners. Now, I want to be clear. It wasn't that winning or losing didn't matter to him. In the game, he was as nuts as I was, maybe even more. Every time we miss a shot, he'd go, ah. The fact that we might not get what we wanted was what made it exciting, right? But in the end, the relative result of winning or losing didn't reach his absolute core. He was united completely and absolutely with the quality of the game itself. And when it was over, he appreciated that experience, even though the ending wasn't happy. Just like a movie doesn't need a happy ending to be great. Maybe we learn more from the sad ending. We wipe the tears away, and then on to the next game. We learn, on to the next game, on to the next season, on to the next story. So, our whole lives can be like that. We can appreciate the relative ups and downs, right? We can appreciate the pains and pleasures, the heartbreaks and the love, the challenges and the triumphs. We can appreciate it as part of the whole wondrous, captivating experience, even if we're not liking what's going on right now. we can understand that there is no up without down in the relative sense. And experiencing that up and downness, absolutely, and learning lessons from it to be better for it is actually the worth of life. That's the point. That's the joy. And we can do this all the way to the end of our story. Sooner or later, the game of our life ends, the movie of our life ends, right? And it ends either with happiness or gratitude or sorrow or anything in between. And we might laugh, we might cry, we might gasp in awe. Then on to the next story. We don't know what awaits us outside this movie theater of our life, the basketball arena of our life. We don't know what the next hour or day will bring in this life or afterward. That's the joy too, all right? How pointless would a game or a movie be if we knew all about the next thing before we saw it? So in the end, we're not a success in life or death by measure of whether we're happy or sad moment to moment. We're a success if we're selflessly, fully, absolutely present for the whole crazy relative world of happy and sad and the way they depend completely on each other. And that allows us to appreciate life for exactly what it is, whatever might come. Let's, though, have the master say it in his own words. In the book that brought me to this Zen practice, Maizumi Roshi writes this, okay? How can you experience and confirm your life as the true Dharma I and subtle mind of nirvana? You are already so. Start at least with believing that your life is this. Have faith in this. Then experience your life as your very own. When you do this, right there, your whole life is prajna paramita wisdom itself. Prajna is the wisdom of no duality, no I, you, good or bad. Paramita means to have reached the other shore. But if everything is right here and now, what other shore exists? Some people think the other shore is nirvana, the way we think things should be, the way we wish our life to be. But nirvana is already here. Having reached the other shore, we confirm that this life right now is nirvana. This life is that most precious treasure, the unsurpassable way, the way of true realization. I encourage you, this is still Maizumi Roshi speaking. I encourage you, please enjoy this wonderful life together. Appreciate the world of just this. There is nothing extra. Genuinely appreciate your life as the most precious treasure and take good care of it. That's what Maizumi Roshi has to say about appreciating your life, and that's my talk today. Now, before I open it up for any thoughts or questions, I'll mention, and in case you were, Roshi Jun mentioned this at the beginning, but I'll mention it again. I'm teaching our Path of Liberation course for 4 Tuesday evenings, 7 to 8:15, starting this coming Tuesday. This is the second course in our Zen curriculum, but you don't necessarily have to have taken the first to get something out of the second, and we'll recap the first course at the beginning so people have a perspective. So 7 to 8:15 p.m. for 4 Tuesdays starting this Tuesday night, and details are on the website, zlmc.org, if you're interested in enrolling. We've still got room for you. So that's my talk. Does anybody have any questions, comments, laments? We go to gallery view here.
Robert, I really appreciate your comparing sport to life, because
I've been known to do that, Earl.
Yes, I mean, it truly is. for people maybe who don't, participate in sport, it is very much, just a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
I had a professor who's big sports fan, still a friend of mine, who said, sports is just life kind of stripped down to its essence and scored for instruction. And I think that's really true in a way. And it's like theater, but we don't know the end, that's what part of what has always attracted me about it. So.
Robert.
Yes.
I again, as one of your former and will be future students, I again appreciate and really always enjoy hearing you speak. But I'm reminded, and the details get blurry because it was 1985, my senior year in college. I did one of the things we read about was this wonderful article by Borges, Jose Luis Borges, and it was about professional wrestling. Okay, and he addressed full on the fact that so many people reject it because it's quote unquote fake, right?
Yeah,
and
the Mexican pro wrestling.
What's that?
Was he talking about the Mexican pro wrestling?
All professional wrestling, not just Nacho Libre, right? But the idea was, and he compared it, which was interesting, to Hamlet. We go see, and for me, my favorite is Macbeth. I could see Denzel Washington as Macbeth 5 more times. I've seen it 3. But the idea is we go to see Shakespeare even though we know the ending, okay? We are still enthralled with the lessons, the life, the beauty, the poetry, and basically gave me an appreciation that even if you know the ending, you can still appreciate the performance. And I think the Japanese do that with their tea ceremony and with how they quote unquote play at life and death. So it just kind of ties it all together. And you're welcome, by the way, to root for my Knicks since your Bucks are no longer in the playoffs.
Right now, I can't even watch basketball. It's just so sad. I tried to watch one of the games the other night. I was just like, ugh. But, it's interesting. I'm an opera fan. My mother was from Italy, and that's the music I grew up with in the house. And, opera is largely the same 40 or 50 operas performed over and over and over all over the world, right? It's a very tight repertoire, but people love going because the quality of the music will sweep us into it and make us forget what the next thing is almost. We're so involved with the drama minute to minute. And what I love about opera is that the quality of the singing can enhance that so much. And I have really vulgar tastes in opera. For me, if I'm not getting a chill right here, forget it. I don't like it. Whereas the person I usually go to the opera with, a cousin of mine who's a very fine technical musician, is more into the musicianship. Oh, did you notice the way she flubbed that high C? And I'm like, who cares? It was fantastic. So that's sort of what we do at the opera. But I just think that it's a theater of life, and it's good to approach it that way.
Hi, Robert. This is Chris in the room.
Hey, Chris.
I just want to say thank you for that amazing talk. It was the way that you were able to bring such challenging concept, grounding it, making it a little bit more knowable, even though it continues to be unknowable, was really wonderful. The use of metaphor is just terrific. So just thank you very much. It was really meaningful to me.
Thank you. I taught metaphor and symbolism, even worse.
Thank you, Robert. That was really an excellent talk. Really appreciated, especially the example of your husband at the game. That was really good in terms of, right, that beginner's mind, even though you have such a big preference there, that's just What a teaching that is.
I
Thank
learned a
you.
lot. I'm still going to be mad the next time we lose, but maybe maybe it won't reach me quite so much.
Right. And I love this quote in Nancy Mujo Baker's book, Opening to Oneness. The darkness of ignorance is inseparable from nirvana.
Yep. Everything is. So.
Yeah, Robert, I also want to say another thing. I want to thank you for being courageous and taking on, maybe traditional Dharma, and your explanation of your take on Dharma. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm still figuring it out. I think we never stop figuring it out. It's too big and too vast to ever really have. We talk about enlightenment, but it's all levels of realization. And, we're all just trying to figure it out, and we all have different ways of understanding it. And then sharing that, we all learn it. So hopefully.
Thanks so much, Robert. It was a wonderful talk. I just really loved it.
Thanks. I enjoyed giving it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robert. I really, so much of that to sit with, and I really enjoy your perspective. Something about it, I feel like maybe it is your excellent metaphors. I'm not sure, but something really connects with me when you speak. And I just like what was the one phrase you said, that like, we're not just putting a smiley sticker on top of our life. I feel like that makes a lot of sense to me. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, everyone. Yes, Robert?
Wish I was there to have refreshments.
Ah, yes, the kinship
I'll make my
circle.
own.
Yes. All right. We'll miss you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good Sunday.
Enjoy the kinship hour.